China interacts ever more intensively with the outside world, the international media's depiction of China is critical in shaping how you see me and my fellow countrymen. The Belt and Road Initiative is one case in point where persistently negative reporting may dominate your screens. But are you seeing both sides of the coin? If not, what's missing? Join me, Liu Xin, in Headline Buster as I dissect headlines around the world to make sure you are not misinformed about a rising China. In 2013, Chinese President Xi Jinping broached the idea. He talked about a Silk Road economic belt and a 21st century maritime Silk Road. Now, those ideas are primarily promoting economic cooperation with an emphasis on infrastructure development. Let's take a look at this map here. And on land, for instance, we're talking about the Silk Road economic belt, which stretches all the way from eastern China, going all the way to the other end of the Eurasian continent, to the countries such as Portugal, for instance. That's thousands of miles away, and you can see the routes going there on land. And then on sea, we also, of course, have sea routes from eastern China going down south through the South China Sea, across the Indian Ocean, and then to eastern Africa, and then all the way to the southern ports in southern Europe and in other parts of Europe as well, through land connections. But let me tell you, don't get it wrong, the Belt and Road Initiative is not just about the Eurasian continent or the African continent. Actually, it spans over other parts of the world, as we are speaking. Countries in Latin America, in North America, countries in Oceania have also come on board. As we speak, by the end of March this year, 125 countries from around the world and 29 international organizations have already signed memoranda of understanding with the Chinese government to officially endorse this initiative. Among them, Italy was the first G7 country to officially come on board. So indeed, a warmest welcome to all of them. As I said, 5 years on, all of these ideas are slowly becoming more clearer in focus and are brought to life on the ground. We have projects such as the Jakarta-Bandung high-speed railway, or the Gwadar port in Pakistan, or the Mombasa-Nairobi highway in Kenya, as well as some 80 industrial parks scattered in Belt and Road countries. So indeed, a lot of things are happening. And right now you're looking at the China Railway Express, which are connecting over 100 cities in 15 European countries and China. By the end of 2018, this expressway has made over 12,000 trips linking the two ends of the Eurasian continent. That's comparing to just 11 such trips in 2011. Now, in terms of sea routes, China has about 600 major port connection with 600 major ports around the world. That is also a significant increase than 5 years ago. In terms of civil aviation, China has established over 1,200 new international flight routes over the past 5 years. That is about 70% of all new routes added to China's civil aviation network with the rest of the world. So such connectivity has indeed created very tangible results and socio-economic changes in the countries that have participated in this initiative. One figure I can give you is that some 300,000 jobs have been created as a result of these projects and this initiative. However, voices of skepticism, voices of negativity have been dominant in the international media about this initiative. Exactly what is going on, why there is so much negativity, and what can be done to address these issues. So in the next mini segment that is called Headline Buster, I'm going to dissect some international coverage of the Belt and Road Initiative and try to find out exactly why fairness is missing. And this is not just in China's self-interest, but also in your self-interest, because you deserve to be fairly and to be well informed about the Belt and Road Initiative and about the relationship between China and your country. So I'm going to start with this New York Times report. Actually, it's a Reuters report that was carried by the New York Times earlier this year and then seen by people from around the world. And look at the title there. It says, China struggles to ease concerns over the Silk Road project as summit looms. Now, ladies and gentlemen, look at the words that are used here. China struggles. Look at the concerns. And then looms, looms, you use the word loom when something big and scary is coming, probably in the dark with a big shadow, So imagine why they're choosing this word, instead of using a big summit approaches or something, which is much more neutral and color-free. And then struggles. What does struggle imply? It implies that there are so many concerns, there's so many problems that probably China can't cope with that. But is that reality? As I said, over 125 countries sign up to it. If these countries are not assured about the potential of this initiative, they won't be there. So, although there might be concerns, but is it so bad? Is the situation so bad? Let's take a look at the body of this article and preferably some of the first paragraphs. This is the fourth paragraph, I remember, and this little detail caught my attention. It says, following the first Belt and Road Forum Summit 2 years ago in a luxuriously appointed convention center in the hills north of Beijing, the same one is scheduled for the same location in late April. So mind the words, the luxuriously appointed hotel. Why this detail here? How relevant is that? Of course, when heads of state come from around the world and convene in China, China is going to bring out the best to treat our guests from afar, and these are very important people. What's wrong with a luxurious convention center? Is the writer trying to suggest something, that maybe China is trying to put up its best and lure a country to some kind of a trap? I don't know, but it definitely plants that kind of seed in the mind of the readers from the very first part of this report. Now, let's go on. Let's go on and continue reading the second part, the following part of the story. For instance, here it says, is quoting an unnamed EU official as saying, now for China, it is a question of power projection. China is corrupting what should be a level playing field by offering loans that send country debts soaring and create a culture of economic dependency on Beijing. As I said, this is an anonymous source from the EU. First of all, why? If this person is not qualified to comment on behalf of the EU, why is this particular comment chosen here? Does the EU have an official opinion? I think the official opinion is they're open. That's why they're sending a delegation to this meeting. So this person is probably the best person to speak on behalf of the EU. And then, after this comment, did the journalist follow up and say, so this is your opinion, but is there any potential positive side of this initiative? Are you asking this question? Or from other parts of the world, from other countries, are there any potentially positive side of this story? Now, as I mentioned, China has signed this Belt and Road Initiative agreement with European countries such as Portugal, such as Greece, such as Italy. In fact, 26 European countries have been on board this initiative. That says, I think that speaks volume of the kind of interest, of the kind of openness European countries have. So when you think back at that headline of this story, which says China struggles to ease concerns over Silk Road project at summit looms, I think it's fairly exaggerated, it's fairly generalized, and it's fairly one-sided. Very misleading. Okay, let's go on to another story. This time I'm turning my eyes to Asia, to our neighbor in India, which is a story published by the Hindustan Times. Also, very recent story published in the past February. And this story says China's BRI is facing resistance in the region, says ministry report. Now, this report cites a study by the Indian Union Ministry of External Affairs, which says because of unacceptable conditions imposed by China on countries neighboring India, that the Belt and Road Initiative is experiencing very strong resistance in this country. But again, it's just this side of the story. It's, there is no other positive and potentially positive side to this initiative. The report describes the Belt and Road Initiative as, and this is the first paragraph, again, setting the tone, making the first impression. That says the Belt and Road Initiative is a connectivity project linked to Chinese President Xi Jinping and is facing pushback, especially in India's immediate neighborhood, according to a study by the Union Ministry of External Affairs at a time when Beijing is getting ready to host the second Belt and Road Forum meeting in this April. Now, here it's very interesting that it says the Belt and Road Initiative is linked to Chinese President Xi Jinping. What does that mean? Why is it linked to President Xi alone? Is that his personal project? Does it mean that it is a vanity project for himself with some kind of a personal economic or political interest? It doesn't answer this question, but it kind of leads you to feel that way. And then the second paragraph, how the journalist describes this initiative. It says, the project, built at about $900 billion US, will enhance China's influence and is seen as a key to its global ambitions. The number is wrong, okay, never mind. It's always difficult to get numbers correct all the time. But here it says it's seen as a key to China's global ambitions. By whom? By everybody or just by some people? Again, it doesn't specify, but it generalizes and says that as if the whole world is kind of seeing it as a key of China's global ambitions. I think that is a little bit generalizing too much. Then it does the same thing as the Reuters report by quoting an Indian official who is not convenient to be named. We do not know why he is speaking on behalf of the Indian government. And he says, the Belt and Road Initiative is as much about China getting a foothold across the world, projecting itself globally, as it was shoveling excess Chinese capacity. And the options for many countries to pay back loans from China is difficult. Mind the word, shoveling. What do you mean by shovel? When do you use the word shovel? When you throw something under the carpet, or when you throw something away that you don't need, that is undesirable, you use the word shovel. But does it imply something here? Yes, it implies that China is dumping what it doesn't need to countries around the world. But China is cooperating with countries around the world with high quality production capacity. So shoveling is a very misleading word. But again, this is just the opinion of this Indian official. But did the journalist ask anybody else or provides a different side of the coin by saying, although there are negativity, there is suspicion, although there are debt problems, it's probably not seen by everybody as the same thing. I did a little bit of research, and according to a study released last March by the Center for Global Development, which is a think tank based in Washington, D.C. and London, they say the Belt and Road causes no significant debt risk to countries benefiting from or as participate in this initiative. They say, although the aggregated sum might be large, might appear to be large, the amounts are consistent with the current level of infrastructure investment. Again, you hear no mention of this kind of argument in this story. So this is just an example of how maybe this particular journalist interprets the Belt and Road Initiative. But I see there are potential consequences because he can potentially negatively influence the readers. And what's at stake? India and China could be missing precious opportunities to enhance their understanding with each other. Here I want to say, although the Chinese can do a much better job in communicating with the world about the Belt and Road. This is the official portal of the Belt and Road Initiative, which is idaiyilu.org.cn, or the English version is eng.idaiyilu.org.cn. Now, for any of you who do not know Chinese, this might look a bit weird, right? But actually, idaiyilu is the Chinese pinging, is the Chinese way to say the Belt and Road Initiative. Mind the fact that China also have to inform its huge domestic audience here in China, so they're using this name. Of course, for the international audience, it's not so easy to remember, it's not so easy to find. So I guess both sides have something to do here, and but we're going to talk about it. I think there is a lot to be dug out under the over-negativity of the great majority of international media, and I'm going to invite my colleagues from China, India, and Germany to talk about it right after this break. Stay with us. We were talking about the international coverage about China's Belt and Road Initiative, and I have with me here in the headquarters of the Beijing CGTN building, Mr. Wang Cong, a business reporter from the Global Times, an influential voice for the Chinese authorities, Atul Aneja, a Beijing-based associate editor for The Hindu, which is one of India's oldest newspapers, and Frank Sieren, journalist, bestseller author, and one of leading German China specialists. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Welcome, welcome. So I did that long monologue. You must have followed, I hope. I would like to hear your feedback. Have I been fair? Have I said anything that's too much, that's too generalizing? I must admit, I was also cherry picking, because in the sea of international media coverage, I can only possibly pick a few drops. But I think these were representative of the kind of reporting that we're seeing too often about the Belt and Road Initiative. So I picked those examples. Frank, let me start with you.
Yeah, at least it was a strong and clear opinion, and that's what I liked in your little statement. I think in most of the points you're right. We need to have a more balanced view in the West on the One Road and Belt Initiative. But on the other side,
You're being balanced here.
I am being balanced as well.
Yeah.
On the other side, for example, if Chinese politicians are saying that it's not a geopolitical tool, that's probably not the right way to put it, because at the end of the day, it is a geopolitical tool, but it can still be a win-win situation. So it would be easier to say, yes, sure, it helps China to gain power in the world, to become more important. But on the other side, it will be good, or it can be good for the countries participating. It can be good for the world economy. And if it's done in a way that everyone can participate. So if there are tenders which are not transparent, or which are transparent in a way that only Chinese enterprise can succeed, then this is a problem. We should talk about it. But I would wish that the Europeans, especially the Europeans, would have started discussions much earlier and would have said, okay, that's your position and I have a different position.
They're distracted. They're busy with so many things. But I want to pick up in the one point that you mentioned, which I find interesting. You say China says it is not a geopolitical tool, but it is a geopolitical tool. There is an opinion. Okay, there is an opinion. This is your opinion, because from China's perspective, I believe, I understand, China didn't start this initiative to gain geopolitical influence, but rather it's an economic cooperation initiative.
At the end of the day, and if you say,
which could result in greater geopolitical influence. So that is the way. But again, let's debate the media part in it. You know, the way how the media is shaping the story they're writing, and in terms of how journalists are writing this, Atul, what is your understanding, especially now that I picked an Indian story? I didn't do it on purpose, but I think because of there is a lot of negative reports about this initiative in India.
Look, let's go to the basic assumption behind the story. I think in a lot of world media, and which also includes Indian media, I think it's inescapable. It's being assumed that the Chinese Belt and Road is a geopolitical project. It's just not the rise of China, but domination of China. I think that's the assumption which needs to be questioned. In my own view, I think I personally support the Belt and the Road for a reason, and that is that from a unipolar moment which we had after the collapse of the Berlin Wall in '89, we are now at the cusp of a multipolar world, where China and other Asian countries, Eurasia, is again coming into its own. So I think it's a good thing for the world to be a multipolar world.
Totally agree.
And if it is a multipolar world with no individual country dominating it, I think you open the room for collaboration and cooperation. So I basically contest this assumption that the entire Belt and Road is about China dominating the world and the rise of the dragon. You create the imagery about it as if China is going to stranglehold the rest of the world.
How much is your voice heard? I mean, you can write about it from your perspective, but the great majority have this assumption. How much do you see your voice getting out there?
It's a problem. I have been writing about it, that, you know, you've got to look at a balanced view. I'm not saying that China is lily white and that, you know, it's not that. but it's a rise of a nation, and you got to see it in a broader perspective of what has been happening, especially, as I said, after the collapse of the Soviet Union. We are in a multipolar era, and it's good for the world to be multipolar.
My feeling in the West, in Europe, I spent 6 years in Switzerland, my feeling is that people are not aware of the changes that are taking place. You know, they're in their small world, in their local
zone as well.
their
Yes,
comfort
that's
zone,
true.
and
That's
the
true.
journalists, and I say that's why journalists play a critical role. They need to sense what's going on around them. They have the responsibility, right, to bring the changes that are happening. Otherwise, their local readers will be left behind, and that has, I think, a very negative consequences for the people in Germany or in India.
Yes, but this has to do, again, it has to do that it's not so easy to change mindsets from people. And we grew up in the West in this Cold War mentality. At school, there was a good side of the world and the bad side of the world. It was very simple. And it's very, very difficult to adapt your mindset. So it takes time, and this will also take time for journalists.
I think it got reinforced when we had Francis Fukuyama saying after the collapse that it's the end of history. And then you have this hugely disruptive project, which is reshaping the entire world.
It's not the end of history.
It's not.
It's far from ending.
Probably a beginning of a new phase, and a very, very
Probably, but
exciting.
Okay, go ahead, please.
First of all, I've been waiting here for a couple minutes, but before I jump into that, I want to point out that this is not a very easy task to cover China, to cover the Belt and Road.
You're being fair here.
Yeah, because I mean, China.
You mean for Chinese journalists or for international?
For both. Because I mean, China, this is a huge country whose history and society is so vibrant, so diverse that not only foreign media but Chinese media to tell that story. And the economic success story is nothing like less than a miracle. So it's already very hard to tell that story, that full picture to the Western media, Western audience. And then the Belt and Road. I follow the Western media coverage of Belt and Road very closely.
What do you think?
And also I myself cover the Belt and Road very extensively as well. And after that, I found the laziness and the ignorance is the least of the problems. The biggest problem is prejudice, inherent prejudice and bias towards everything that China touched. Not only Belt and Road.
Do you have something like an example or a report that you have on top of your mind to
of course, I mean, there
you've seen?
Tons. I mean, in addition to those two you pointed out, for the debt trap argument, right? There's a couple of projects. For example, the Hambantota port in Sri Lanka. Last year, around August, I mean, that was the symbol of the debt trap argument. And then this year, actually, it was reported that India, an Indian company, an Indian power company called Accord Group, and the government of Oman struck a deal and to build an oil refinery in that port, in that industrial zone. Last year, it was reported that, oh, this is China is going to take over this port, and it's a sovereignty issue. But now, other companies joined that, build a refinery there. The reason that they built that refinery is a $4.4 billion project, the largest foreign investment in Sri Lanka. The reason they built that there is the port. The Chinese companies built that infrastructure, so they went there to build that. And how Reuters reported that deal, it was not mentioned anywhere in the in the paragraph, which was also carried by Hindu. Actually, that story, it wasn't even mentioned that the Chinese companies were built, running those port, that industrial zone. It was not even mentioned. And towards the end, it says that, by the way, this is, this port was built and then run by a Chinese company.
Well, you guys, you shouldn't break out in tears now. You're quite
no,
strong,
actually, and then Frank,
find your way to put your arguments out in the world, to put your view out in the world, like in this show.
Well,
that's right.
We only want
Frank,
because you won't change our colleagues. They do what they ever want to do. And
that's the sad part. I think that's the sad part.
Yeah,
I mean, we are only one voice.
I don't think it's a sad part, because it's part of the free press.
Yes,
it
that's
has
the
sad
argument.
Well,
sides.
Frank, can I jump in
free
there?
press has
Sad-
to be different from biased press.
It has sad sides,
Right.
it has advantages and disadvantages.
I wanna
Because
respond to
in
that.
the West, you
Can I
seem to be the
get to your
textbook
point?
example of
Yes.
journalism. You
Yes.
teach the rest of the world journalism.
Yes.
You know, you say you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to check your sources,
You can
have
teach journalism as well. To
But
the
I
rest
mean,
of the
there's
world.
a there's
No,
a
but
fine line,
I'm
yeah.
saying the
I'm in
teachers.
favor of a multipolar world.
Yeah, but I'm
order,
saying
so
the
come and join.
teachers
Yeah,
of
the global
journalism
debate.
seem not to be doing a very good job when it comes to China,
Yeah,
especially.
can I address that very
Yeah.
quickly?
Please.
Because yes, that argument about we have a free press, it's balanced, it's independent. Yes, that argument actually it's going to become a cliche. There's a fine line between being critical of something and peddling unsubstantiated
totally agree.
bias, and you know,
I totally
there's
agree.
a fine line.
But that's
you
how
can't
the
just
world
make
is.
that argument and then we go on report
I can't
something.
change it.
For example,
Actually,
impeachment in
no, no, no,
1987,
I
right?
don't
I want to react
understand
to
Atul,
the
please,
Hambantota argument. I think what it really shows is that there is an economic logic which countries and companies will follow. If a certain area is attractive for business,
Right.
companies will come. Just in the Sri Lankan case,
That's
you
the
know,
whole
it's
idea.
an Indian company came because it thought it'll make money out of it, and not because of any geopolitical reason.
Right.
So that's one thing which will keep the Belt and the Road rolling, whether you call this project under the Belt and the Road or otherwise.
Yeah.
There'll be economic sort of propulsion of the project.
Given this momentum of the historic memory, of bias, of ideology, what can be done as a starting point? Frank, are you saying that don't expect people to change? They are going to be the way they are?
No, things are going to change, but probably it takes a while to change people. And as China is getting more influential politically and economically, the media will become more influential as well, because you need more and more, you need to listen to the Chinese perspective. So, and if you do
It could
talk
be
show
the
like this,
opposite, actually. It could be the opposite.
No.
That, you know, China is too strong, that we have to watch out. Everything they say is propaganda. We should be more forthcoming about, you know, information about, because
Data.
there's nothing sketchy about these projects going on. These are normal commercial economic cooperation. We should be more, you know, I have been interviewing with a lot of, you know, officials, analysts. They're basically the same Chinese mentality, that if we, you know, keep our heads down and do our jobs, people will see the benefits, people will join, there will be more support. But we're living a different world. You know, this is, if you don't say something, some other people will say it and then make it, for you, and then that will change it. So it becomes more and more dangerous. And, you know, so that's
What
why...
do you think has to be done from the Chinese part? Do you think the Chinese media also has a job to do in terms of being more balanced, more nuanced, when it comes to talking about telling China's story to the rest of the world?
Obviously, because, I mean, that's the thing. Going back to that same argument, we have to be critical of this project. I mean, we're not in illusion that this is this massive project. There will be no problem, no obstacles. We have to be realistic.
India, what media can do to bring a better, fairer, more balanced
I think
picture?
India is very nicely positioned, you know, because of our own tradition and being a civilization, to understand what the Chinese side is saying. And well, while you critique it, I think it's also important to put it to deep factual analysis and take an objective view of the situation. I think there's another point that I think we as Indians have to decide where we belong. One, the so-called Indo-Pacific with Japan and the US. Do we belong there? Or do we belong to the Eurasian construct which is coming here? Or do we play a bridging role between the two? I think that's a decision fundamentally we have to take, that where do we belong, and that would shape our perspective on the Belt and Road. But I think the most important thing is fairness and objectivity.
We have to wrap it up. Of course, there's huge topics and potentially huge topic for our next discussion. So I want to thank once again my guests, Wang Cong, a business reporter from Global Times, Atul Aneja, associate editor for The Hindu, and Frank Sieren, journalist, bestseller author, and one of the leading German-China specialists. And of course, I want to thank you for having followed us on this very special edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin. As always, you can follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle The Point with LX. Download the application called CGTN to watch the show on your mobile devices, or go to YouTube and look for CGTN The Point. Thanks for watching. You've got The Point.